practice-based pranayama workshop that we will be doing today. So I highly encourage all of you to sit in a place where you can practice. If at all, if you are somewhere where you cannot understand, but you will benefit more if you can take part in the breathing techniques and practices that Dr. Romandetta is going to share with us. So that's a little bit of introduction for today's session. We'll get started with a couple starting chants or mantras as we do for all our yoga practices. The first one will be Sahana Vavatu, followed by Pranayama mantra. So I encourage all of you to come to a comfortable posture. Sit with your back and neck aligned, your shoulders relaxed. Take a moment to close your eyes and bring your awareness to your body. Take note of anything that you notice right now. Most importantly, pause, take a break from everything that is happening around you, and focus your awareness to notice what is happening in this moment right now. As your body begins to settle down, notice the activity of breath. It's important that you really pause. If possible, close your eyes and just notice how you breathe. Take a deep breath in, maybe the longest or the deepest breath today so far this morning, welcoming that nourishing energy into you. And as you exhale, bring yourself to this moment, starting with the first chant, Sahana Vavatu. Join me if you are familiar. Hands in Namaskara Mudra at your heart center. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Punaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Next, we have a chant that is specific to pranayama. This is from Prashnopanishad. All together. Pranasedam vashe sarvam tridiveyat pratishtitam mateva putran rakshasva shrishcha prajnancha videhinaiti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Release your hands. And today, a very quick introduction to our speaker, our expert today. We have with us Dr. Lois Romandetta, who by training is a GYN oncologist who has been serving and working with hundreds and thousands of cancer patients at MD Anderson for the last 25 years or more. But most importantly, she's wonderfully passionate about yoga and yoga therapy. So she started her yoga journey as a practitioner and went on to get her 200-hour certification, 300-hour certification, and came to us at Vyasa Houston for her full yoga therapy certification, where she dedicated over 3 years to learn yoga therapy in its traditional form and worked again with many patients, bringing yoga therapy in different populations. at MD Anderson. She also is the PI for a cervical cancer study that she's doing, and many more that she's bringing. And her inspiration and enthusiasm is contagious. And I'm so lucky and glad to work with her and call her a colleague as well. So without further delay, I hand it over to Dr. Romandetta. Over to you. Welcome everyone again.
Thank you, Smita. So I'm so happy to be here with you all, and thanks for see lots of friends from different parts of my life. So happy to see you all. And I'm honored and humbled to be able to share what I know about this practice with all of you. Thanks, Smita. So I'm going to go ahead and actually share slides. And so the way we'll do this is many of you know all about different aspects of pranayama from different traditions. And many of you teach pranayama. And what I'd like to do is kind of bring a different way of thinking about it, the way that I approach it from that of a physician. So let me go back a little bit. So I'm going to just start to introduce myself for a moment, just so that you know, I've been at MD Anderson for about 26 years. And I usually say I'm a wannabe yogi because, as we all know, you never actually arrive at being a yogi. It's a process. It's something that you have to do and kind of reset yourself over and over again, often when you maybe fall off the yogi bandwagon. And so I wanted to think that where I started practicing was at a couple of studios around Houston, as I've been here a long time. And I ended up getting my 200 and 300 hour training from Big Power Yoga, and thank them very much for the practice, which is a very asana-based practice, but gave me the foundation to move forward into yoga therapy. I also have I'm a diplomat in the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and I feel strongly about incorporating preventative techniques like lifestyle changes involving food and diet and stress management into the practice of doing oncology and bringing it into the lives of my patients. I also sometimes joke that it might even be a gene in the family, because I seem to have two yogis in the family that have made names for themselves. One of them is Joan White, who is my mother's cousin, who teaches Iyengar yoga in Philadelphia, and the other one is Sridhar Silverfine, who has been running Bhatki Fest in Palm Springs for the last 10 years, and was one of the first people to bring a yogi to Woodstock. So let me tell you really briefly about the difference, because many of you are yoga teachers or yoga practitioners, or you're yoga therapists, but there is a difference between, let me just move this for a minute. There's a difference between a yoga therapist and a yoga teacher. And there is an International Association of Yoga Therapists. Yoga therapy is it's a professional application of the practices of yoga to promote health and well-being within a therapeutic, kind of a treatment relationship with a yoga therapist and a client that includes a personalized assessment, goal setting, lifestyle management, and yoga practices for individuals. Oops, hang on a minute. And the yoga therapists approach patients or clients in a way that really renewed my awe in medicine, which I might have lost a little bit somewhere along the way. And what I really love about it is the way an individual person is approached. So in Western medicine, we focus very much on this outer sheath, one of the koshas called the Annamaya kosha. And that is everything that we learned in medical school. It's all about diabetes and bone health and what you eat and when you sleep. And that is really where I spent the majority of my medical training. And we do talk about a couple of the other sheaths, but not necessarily in the same way. So the second sheath is the one that we'll be focusing on today, and that is the Pranayama kosha, and that is your energetic sheath. And you can think about that in a number of different ways. You could think about it as kind of the energy that a person brings into the room, or the energy at which somebody approaches everything in their life. And it really gave me a different way of looking at patients as an oncologist, and I really am appreciating what that's added to my ability to care for people. The third sheath is called the Manomaya kosha, and that is where the yogis believe all our problems come from, that we think ourselves often into those issues. And that is definitely something that I have dealt with in my own life, and I see my patients deal with as well. And as a yoga therapist, you can approach this with a different technique, looking at the energy that they have, looking at some of the habitual tendencies they have, and use yoga philosophy to try to help redirect. The fourth sheath is called the Vijnanamaya kosha, and that is your wisdom sheath. And you might even look at that as the person inside of you that could step back and notice why you are doing things the way you've been doing them all your life. And the Anandamaya kosha, well, I would love to get there more often, but I usually say that is the innermost core, the part that is your inner light that connects us to everyone else, that connects us to a universal source, and one that sometimes I can see a shimmer of after a long practice. Yoga therapy is a process of empowering people to progress towards improved health through the applications of yoga. And it is about not only empowering, but making them enthusiastic, helping them to find their own enthusiasm for moving themselves in that direction. So the goal for yoga therapy is to remove the obstacles and separation at each level that kind of helps them find this inner sheath. And there are many different tools, and I promise I won't talk forever, but there are many different tools in yoga therapy that we use. And by looking at those 5 sheaths, you can approach them with the tools from yoga therapy. So for instance, with the physical practice, you can, the Annamaya kosha, that's where you can use some loosening practices, some asanas, some of the postures that we do. And there are kriyas or cleansing techniques. And then there could be simply just watching the way you eat, making sure you're sleeping well, all of those things that we do in Western medicine. In terms of the Pranamaya kosha, which we'll talk about today, we can look at the person's energy and kind of decide which breath practices could be most useful for them. In the Manomaya kosha, we can work to calm the mind with meditation and devotion. And then with the Vijnanamaya kosha, we can look at ways for them to do self-inquiry, including philosophical practice, spiritual texts, maybe even just reflections from their own religious background. And then really the bliss or Anandamaya kosha sheath, we're looking to find what makes people happy and find meaning in their lives. And so on a simpler form, for those of you who are yoga teachers, you're probably more familiar of the eight limbs of yoga. And what I really want to emphasize is that when we talk about yoga, we often are only talking about the third limb, the asana or the movement practice. But there's so much more to yoga. It is a lifestyle. It is a way of approaching everything that you're doing. And it involves both ways of behaving towards yourself and to others that help you avoid drama that take you away from that bliss. It involves the asana to keep yourself healthy, but then it also involves pranayama, which we'll talk more about, pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses with this constant bombarding of social media and news, but going inside to see your own ways, your own inner way of being. Dharana or concentration, dhyana, which is meditation, and then samadhi, hopefully to reach a sense of bliss. And all of them, I have those little Russian dolls lined up at the bottom, are to try to get to that innermost core. So asana, is really just the body's preparation for pranayama. And interestingly, we all talk about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, but Patanjali only devotes 3 sutras towards asana specifically. And some have said, and this is just a wonderful book if you all don't have it, the Pranayama, the Breath of Yoga by Gregor Mallet, is a quote that I love that says, to practice asana without going on to pranayama is like continuing to plow a field without ever sowing the seed, or like washing a garment over and over again without wearing it. And so many of us could really move to expand our yoga practice through the practice of pranayama. So what is pranayama? Pranayama is broken into two words in Sanskrit. It's prana and ayama. Prana means vital life energy. It's the source of which might be from the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, water and sun. And ayama is about expanding or extending this life energy. Another great quote, which is in the introduction to one of the Upanishad translations by Eswaran, talks about prana as a technical term for the energy which fuels evolution, powers vital processes in all forms of life, and ultimately becomes thoughts and desires in the mind where it becomes most readily accessible for us to conserve or redirect. And so what is the point of all this? It is to gain control over the energy of our body. This involves all the 8 limbs of yoga. This involves the yamas and niyamas, which I mentioned, which because, for instance, you bring drama and a poor use of prana to your life by kind of engaging in negative self-talk, in engaging in judgment of others, in finding discontent in your own life. These are aspects of your life that drain your prana. And so by following the niyamas and the yamas, you preserve your prana for the place that it needs to be. So you want to remove agitation and turbulence. You want to balance your physical tissues. You want to prepare for the higher levels of yoga because you can't get to that calm state of mind when your mind is involved in possibly the poor interactions you've had with yourself or others, or because your physical body hurts too much to be able to sit still. So Patanjali actually talks about pranayama much more than he talks about, and of course I say he meaning they, we really don't know who, whether Patanjali was a group of people or just one person, but there are many sutras in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras that talk about pranayama. For instance, Sutra 1.34 talks about the calm that's retained by the controlled exhalation or retention of breath, and that is one of the most important points that we'll speak more about. It is also about regulating inhalation, exhalation, airflow, and retention. Sutra 2.5 says the breath becomes long and subtle when the inflow and outflow and retentions are observed precisely according to time, place, and number. Sutra 2.5 talks about the 4th variety of pranayama, or kumbhaka, which is one that goes beyond the sphere of internal and external. And then, of course, the benefits of pranayama, which we've talked about, trying to reach that sense of bliss or that innermost sheath, is from the practice of pranayama, the covering of the light or the darkness of ignorance that covers the light of knowledge is dissolved, and the veil over our inner light is destroyed. And then 2.53, that the mind can develop an opportunity for concentration. So you've heard this before, where the mind goes, so the prana flows, what you meditate on, so you become. And we all know there are times, maybe we're driving in traffic, maybe we've raced to the airport and we find out that that we're so late that they won't let us board, that we find ourselves breathing fast and shallow. And we're very lucky that we have what's called an autonomic nervous system, a system that regulates our breath and our heart and all the things that we do, so that we can run to the airport, so that we can, as they say, run away from the lion back in the day. But we also have a voluntary override, an opportunity to override this autonomic nervous system. So I'm thankful for our autonomic nervous system that keeps our heart beating and our breath continuing when we forget. But I'm thankful that we have this voluntary opportunity to override it. And that's what practicing yoga is really about to me. So in a calm mind, our breathing is slow and deep. It's not always easy to control, but by regulating our breath, we can quiet our mind. And when we quiet our mind, as Yoga Sutra 1.3 and 4 talk about, we can pull ourselves from becoming our mind and our anxiety and our pushing away, our aversion or our attraction towards something. And we can see our inner light and make more strong choices. And for my patients, that's where I feel like it plays the biggest role. When their mind is caught up in fear about where their cancer is taking them, it is hard to make a very careful decision about the treatment choices that they have. So I love this slide. And I say for all of you, how well is this person controlling their mind? Not so much. And so what we're doing is that we're losing energy through these strong emotions, our strenuous activity, sometimes talking too much, and useless activity. So let's start with our first practice. And Smita is so lovely when she talks. It's hard not to feel relaxed just listening to her. But what I really just want you all to do is just experience your breath. And I'm going to offer for you, we have you muted, but if you do feel after the practices that we go throughout the next bit of time, just checking my time here. I'm going to ask you to type occasionally what you're feeling, and we may I'll stop sharing at that time. So let me just stop sharing for a moment here. Great. So I'm going to ask you to do is find a comfortable seat, and your seat may be in a chair. It may be an easy pose where you are having your legs crossed, and it may be on a cushion or in Vajrasana, so where you're sitting on your heels. I will say if you don't have a cushion, I highly encourage them. It kind of brings your hips up above your knees, and you can sit a little bit more comfortably. You want to be stacking your ears over your shoulders over your hips, and then almost even bringing your head back a little bit. You want your spine to be nice and tall. And then if you could close your eyes, and then send your inner eye to one point. Your one point might be the center of your forehead, your third eye. It could be the tip of your tongue or the tip of your nose. So that's where you might put your mind's eye. And then you may put your hands for this first practice, right hand on the belly, left hand on the heart. What I'd like you to do is just breathe normally. And if you can, always breathe through your nose. There's feeling that stimulating the olfactory nerves brings more changes to the brain as we work on our pranayama. And just begin to breathe in and out. And in this practice, you might notice a little gratitude towards the beating of your heart that you feel both in your right and your left hand. The beautiful autonomic nervous system that continues your heart beating and your breath initiating. And then I'd like you to gently override this system by extending your inhalation and extending even a little longer your exhalation. Focus on the sensations associated with the inhalations and exhalations. Maybe notice where your inspirations are initiated. Noticing the warm air as you exhale, and the wiggling of your nose hairs as you inhale. Notice also if this is uncomfortable for you. Are you normally a mouth breather? And does it feel different to breathe through your nose? Can you notice your upper chest, your middle chest, and your lower part of your lungs expand as you inhale? Now gently shift your breathing to that ujjayi breath, that victorious breath, where you begin to clench the back of your throat to feel a little more friction as you inhale, noticing even a sound like the inside of a seashell that you've held up to your ear as you inhale. And then the same sound as you exhale, clenching the back of your throat, making your breath more audible, building a little bit of heat, and yet keeping it relaxed. Just take a few more breaths with the ujjayi breath, inhaling, and exhaling. Now that with the last few moments, you can begin to place your hands back on your thighs and open your eyes and just bring a little attention to just this simple breathing that we really don't, and obviously we'll get into more traditional forms of pranayama, but I think that the what is a miracle to me is that we have the diaphragm, this large muscle in our body that is really a free tool for regulating our breath and to calming our mind. And one that we rarely remind our patients to use and rarely remind ourselves to use throughout the day. And it always seems like something that's so simple. But if you could just, if you have a moment to chat something or place something in the chat about how you feel after just taking a few breaths, and if you notice something different between the ujjayi breath and the simple breath. And I'll come back to sharing my screen. Great. So the respiratory system, as many of you already know, is that's the Annamaya Kosha. That is our physical part of our body. It involves our nasal cavity, our nostrils, our epiglottis, the back of our throat, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, the large tube that goes down into the lungs. And then there are the lungs, which fill our cavity. And I have to say, the first time I started practicing yoga, the first thing I noticed back in the day was that my ribs hurt. And it was more a noticing that I hadn't really been using my intercostal muscles. And so here's a picture on the right for you of the ribs expanding and retracting. And the muscles between the ribs actually are muscles that can be made stronger through our inspiratory efforts. Iyengar says that this diaphragm, our diaphragm, is the medium between the physiological and the mental sheets. The physiological body, all the muscles and air exchange of our body, and the mental sheets. This is just a quick picture too of the alveoli, and we'll talk, sorry, I am a doctor, so I am going to talk a little bit about that. But when you take a full inspiration, you actually expand all these little berries at the end of your bronchus. That is where all the gas exchange takes place. And if you don't take a deep breath, you don't fill those alveoli. So we talked a little bit about the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. And what we can say is that the sympathetic is designed to help us meet challenges. And those can be acute challenges, running to the airplane, or they can be chronic stress, like maybe being unhappy in your job or something like that, where every day you go with a little bit of fear, you have shallow breaths, your heart is pumping faster, your gut's inactive, maybe you don't digest quite well. And that system is kind of run by the norepinephrine and epinephrine system, messengers throughout your body. The parasympathetic system is where we rest and digest. So our pupils shrink. We don't need to see as much. We take slow, deep breaths. Our heart slows and our gut becomes active. And that's one of the things that can disrupt our digestive system. And that's kind of run by the messenger acetylcholine. And so sometimes when I'm giving these talks, I sit there and think, oh my goodness, what am I saying about the word prana? Nobody ever talked to me about prana in medical school. And what do I actually mean by that? And I tried to kind of come to sense with that in my head. And so in an Anamaya Kosha sense, to me, prana is something that we cannot measure yet. And though there are components of it that we have measured, and those are the energy producing systems in the body. They're the anaerobic systems and the aerobic systems that help us make ATP, which is one of those energy sources in our body. It is also about the gas exchange that happens in that alveoli that I mentioned, where there's CO2 or carbon dioxide, the things that are breathed out by the plants are breathed in by the plants, are breathed out by us. And this exchange between not nothingness, but the space between us and all other creatures on the planet are going on. In comparison, when you talk in yoga philosophy, many of you are already aware, we talk about energy in a different way. We talk about energy in terms of the 5 vital energies, or the 5 vayus. And we talk specifically about nadis, or energy channels, hundreds and thousands of channels throughout our body, which look a lot like, oops, let me go back for a minute. Hundreds of thousands of give me 1 minute there. Previous, there we go. Channels throughout our body that look a lot like the meridians in Chinese medicine and are used for acupuncture. And specifically, the yoga philosophy talks about 3 major channels: the Pingala, the Ida, and the Sushumna. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about Nadi Shodhana. So as a physician, it's important for me to think about, why is this important? We know that chronic stress is bad for cancer. It is bad for inflammatory disease, including diseases of the immune system, like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and many other chronic inflammation states. We talked about a healthy inflammation, like you need to run to that plane, and that's okay. That's all right. But that chronic stress that you may have because of an interaction with somebody who maybe drains your prana, and I joke sometimes that sometimes teenagers can do that, that you can have kind of excessive inflammation, and that inflammation can lead to kind of a chronic inflammatory disease. And in a yogic sense, that's brahmacharya. It's talking about the right use of energy, and you are misusing your prana when you allow that to drain like that. And so in this right-sided side, I know that's very complicated, but there's a lot of good research about what's happening in the cellular system, in the Anamaya Kosha, when you are stressed all the time. And this particular area talks about that cortisol and norepinephrine and epinephrine happening from your chronic stress from your brain, affecting even all the way down to the blood vessels exchanged with the immune system, where you can have an immunosuppression occurring because of your chronic stress. And your cancer cells, in the next slide kind of shows that, can have a lot of changes. So you may have proliferation of cancer cells. You may have what's called angiogenesis, where the little cancer cells are able to send out a messenger called VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, that calls new blood vessels to the cancer. And we've seen this in research that's been published, that even specifically in mice, that you can see increased levels of VEGF with stressed mice, and using something called a beta blocker, where you decrease epinephrine, you can block this VEGF output. You can have genomic instability, you can have increased metastasis, and we're just learning about a lot of these things, but we know that this can also have an effect on some of the responses to immunotherapy. So I've kind of told you from a basic level why you should learn pranayama, but let's, from a really scientific level, but let's talk about it in more lay terms. So slow, deep breaths produce a relaxed state. You can override your sympathetic system by engaging your parasympathetic system and increasing your vagal nerve strength, so you can improve your ability to override your sympathetic system by practicing these activities. You can decrease the intensity of your sympathetic discharge. And specifically, you can improve your heart rate variability, which is a variation in the time interval between heartbeats. Decreased heart rate variability is not good. Increased heart rate variability, the ability to respond and then calm down and respond and calm down, is what is associated with a longer life. We also know that pranayama has been studied to can help decrease insomnia, your risk of panic attacks and headaches. And through a baroreflex sensitivity, we can decrease hypertension. And as a physician, we know inspirations are important. Any of you who've had surgery have been given this little plastic device when you're in the when you're in your recovery room. It's called an inspiratory spirometer. Interestingly, it does focus on inspiration rather than expiration, which Patanjali stresses is more important. But through this activity, we can decrease the incidence and severity of pulmonary complications, including pneumonia, shortness of breath, atelectasis, which when I was mentioning the alveoli before, atelectasis is when you don't use them all. So it's kind of like a wet sponge. And so we can also improve your oxygen status by improving your breath work here. We can also improve those intercostal muscle strength by building up that, by working on that inspiration. We can improve the amount of oxygen we breathe in, the amount of the lung cavity we're using, and even our inspiratory and expiratory pressures. What's really interesting and underused in oncology in many areas is that it can reduce pain, it can reduce anxiety, it can reduce fatigue, and ladies, it can reduce hot flashes. There's research on reducing intraocular pressure in glaucoma patients, and some of the most interesting research is related to attention span. And specifically through a part of your brain called the locus coeruleus, we believe that we can improve your ability to remember and have good attention. The yogis say you should do it because you'll live longer. In fact, they say rabbits and dogs breathe too quick and they use up all of their breath throughout. That's why they only live 8 years or 15 years. While elephants and turtles and humans breathe a little bit more, between 4 and 12 breaths per minute. And although this might seem a little silly to some, if there are some doctors and scientists on the call, the ideal respiratory rate has been identified to enter a state of relaxation is approximately 6 breaths per minute. And that's why when the doctor takes your respiratory rate, they're looking at, how are you breathing? Are you anxious? Are you breathing above where you should be? Is there something wrong that's making you do that? So we'll move into another exercise, and specifically talking about the components of breath. And this is really just a way to get deeper into your breath cycle. We're mostly concentrating on the last exercise, on inhalation and exhalation, but there are really 4 components. There is the puraka, the inhalation. We did that, which is an active inhalation. And the vichaka, the exhalation. But there is a retention that's done at the top and the bottom, the kumbhaka. And many say that this is the most important practice in pranayama. And so let's take a moment to do that exercise again, this time concentrating on the inhalation and the exhalation. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to read a poem that I think it may bring a little bit more identification to this. So again, find that comfortable seat. And as you inhale and exhale, and you can close your eyes during this, I want you to think a little bit about the top and the bottom being an opportunity to redirect. There's a phenomena in the ocean called slack tides. And this is that moment between when the water is moving out and the water is moving in. And usually it's just a second, but there are periods where the tide reverses and the water is still and calm. And so as you breathe in and breathe out during this next couple of minutes, I want you to think about that opportunity to redirect your breath by pausing at the top, the internal kumbhaka, or at the bottom, the external kumbhaka. Continue your breath as I read. Walking on the beach, I heard a sudden silence as if the universe had stopped. The water waveless now and calm. And in that time, the world and I became as one, and peace and clarity abounded. I hold this image close now. It reminds me that in life, when the tide keeps crashing in, my brain and body fight for a pathway through the flotsam, I too can create a slack tide within the quiet breath of stillness. You can slowly open your eyes, and I hope throughout your practice that you can spend a little more time noticing the top and the bottom of your breath. I'll mention now that this workshop is really just a workshop. There's so much to know about pranayama, and we are just touching the surface. There are a variety of methods to manipulate the breath, and I thought maybe if you guys want, you can try to put in the chat box some ways that you think you can manipulate it, and I'll kind of go through some ways. So if you can think of ways to manipulate your breath, go ahead and write it in the chat. But I'll start to talk about them. And I don't think I can look at the chat at the same time. But Smitha, if you see some on the chat, feel free to come out. But as we've done a little bit already, you can change the pace and your pattern of breathing. You can alter any of the 4 components that we just talked about: the inhalation, the exhalation, the hold at the top, the hold at the bottom. You can use, we talked that we did an active inhalation and a passive exhalation, and later we'll do Kapalabhati breath, which is a reversal of this. There's a retention at the top and the bottom, and the duration that you hold can be one of those things that you manage. You can emphasize different muscles throughout the breathing cycle, and we will practice that too in Dirga Pranayama, where we work on the 3-chamber breathing, which is one that I believe that we should probably be doing throughout the hospital. You can increase or decrease the airway resistance. So what we saw when we switched from just passive breathing to Ujjayi breathing, we can cause a little bit of resistance and make a little fire. You can do that also, and the respiratory therapists do this all the time with pursed lips breathing. So when you exhale with a pursed lip, you increase the resistance as you exhale, and thus maybe open up more of those alveoli. You can do alternate nostril, which we will practice, and you can sing or chant, or you can maybe change where you place your tongue or close your teeth. You can link this to guided or mental imagery, some of my favorite things to do, which we won't have time for, but I love a breath called fountain breath. Love to do that with patients, really where you redirect, where you bring your prana. And you could think perhaps as you're breathing of a flower opening or a flower closing. You could have a mantra: I am breathing in, I am breathing out. Or you could, as many of you may do and not even already recognize that you're doing pranayama, you do it while you're breathing when you're running, or when you're doing ujjayi through yoga, or martial arts, or qigong. And sometimes these have an immediate effect on your autonomic nervous system, but oftentimes the longer you practice, the more you'll find they're accessible. And then just a special one, which we won't have time for today, but what I was talking about is chanting. So many of us who attend religious services, or if you're practicing with the chants, what you're actually doing is pranayama by changing the resistance on your exhalation. So chanting the sound of Om, or chanting Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha is a long exhalation. And that's another way to adjust how you're practicing. So we'll move now into a Viloma practice, where Viloma is the idea of against the grain. And it's, I find that when you look at Sanskrit translations, you find different translations wherever you work, where you are. And I've heard, Anuloma Viloma talked about as um, alternate nostril breathing, but I also have read Viloma as being against the grain, and anuloma with the grain. So if you think of Viloma as inhalation and anuloma as exhalation, you could kind of see why the active inhalation is the Viloma and the exhalation would be the anuloma. But today, what we're going to practice is just an idea of interrupted breathing. And I want you to think about our breath. And really what I'm looking for is you just to get an exposure to multiple different types of pranayama, and then you pick and choose what works for you. And what the benefit of a yoga therapist is that they may be able to talk to you a little bit more about where your energy is. Are you more rajasic, or are you more tamasic, or are you more sattvic? And we'll talk a little bit about sattvic later on, but which breath practices are best for you. So today is really just an exposure. During this practice, we're going to think about climbing a mountain, and the mountain will be in 3 steps. And you're going to make your inhalation volume the same as your exhalation volume. But we're going to break our inhalation into 3 components. And you're going to climb this mountain by inhaling 1/3 of the way up and pausing in that kumbhaka. And then you'll inhale again 1/3 of the way, and inhale again 1/3 of the way. At the top, we will hold, and then you'll exhale the same volume of air very slowly, very continuously. We're going to take that in a practice of, we'll do it about 5 times. And so I'd encourage you to close your eyes, find that position where your ears are stacked over your shoulders are stacked over your hips, and you've got a nice, long, straight spine. And take maybe 1 full breath in, and your hands can be resting palms up on your thigh. Some people like to take the chin mudra where their thumb and index finger together. And I like that one because I visualize that it is a connection between my smaller self, the one here in my physical body, and my bigger self, the one that connects me to everyone else, the universal consciousness. And then using that mudra, I can feel a little more connected. And then just take 1 full deep breath in. And 1 full deep breath out. And on your next breath in, I want you to inhale 1/3 of the volume of the air. So you'll inhale and you'll hold here. And then you'll inhale again and hold here with a relaxed face, relaxed body. Inhale the final full mount. Hold at the top. You may even lift through your pelvic floor. Face is relaxed, body is relaxed. And then exhale slowly, slowly, slowly through your nose. We'll take that again. Inhale. Rest at the step. Inhale. Rest at the step. Inhale. Rest, relaxed face, smile gently. Lift through the pelvic floor. Relax your shoulders. And slowly, slowly release through your nose all the way to empty. Maybe on the next one, you visualize the field through the mountain that you're rising. Wildflowers are blooming 1/3 of the way up. Another inhalation. And another inhalation. Fully exhale and take it 3 more times on your own. I'll be quiet. Ways that you can manipulate this is you probably today practiced in a way that was comfortable for you, but the more you practice, the more volume you may find that you can inhale. The longer the pause at each step. And you perhaps add an empty space at the end where your external kumbhaka is a little bit longer. Smita, if you notice anything, any comments, feel free to come off mute. I'd love to hear if anyone has any feelings about how this Viloma interrupted breathing practice felt for them. Feel free to type in chat.
I don't have anything for
Okay.
that.
All right, very good. Okay, we're going to move into a full yogic breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. And essentially, if we've talked about the lung and the alveoli, this time what we're going to be thinking about is filling all those alveoli and then exhaling completely. And I'm not saying we breathe into our abdomen, but when we do breathe, you saw that picture of the diaphragm dropping down and then lifting back up. And we're going to use that to really take that full deep breath. And so this breath work is called a Durga Pranayama, and it's full yogic breathing. And what we'll be doing is inhaling, thinking about the three components of our body. We're going to think about the three components of the lower part of the chest, where we move the diaphragm down into the abdomen, you fill that area. The middle part where we expand the ribs out in each direction, east, west, north, south, and we try to think of our heart as a barrel, as a heart center of a barrel. And then the uppermost, which is the hardest to visualize, but the top part of your sternum lifts up and your clavicles open up. And oftentimes that's the hardest part to feel. And then I'll give you two opportunities as we practice this breath to think about how you address these three areas. Now you can do it by placing your hands on your belly as we breathe in through the lower part, through our chest in the middle part, or through the sternum by placing your hands up top. Or you can join me in some mudras. And these are the four mudras that we'll use. This is the chin mudra that we talked about earlier. Then that's the one for the deepest part of the breath, the lowest part. Then we'll move to the Chinmaya mudra, where you move your fingers in, but keep your thumb and index finger together. The Adi mudra, where your thumb becomes like a little hot dog on the inside of your fingers. And the Brahma mudra, where you keep your hand, your Adi mudra together at about the level of your belly button right underneath. And so let's try this practice as well. You'll sit straight, shoulders stacked over your hips, eyes closed. Maybe the inner eye is focused in between your eyebrows. And you'll place your chin mudra right on your thighs. And as you breathe in, I want you to think about your breath moving in through your nostrils all the way down into the deepest part of your lung and your diaphragm pulling down into your belly so that even your belly gets a little bit big. And we'll take two more breaths here, inhaling into that deepest part of the belly. And a third time, deepest part of the belly. Good. Squeeze those other fingers in towards your palm and bring your attention now to your heart and imagine it as the center of a barrel. And as you breathe in, expand only through your rib cage. Your belly stays calm and steady, and your ribs expand out. And then, like the petals of a flower, they close down around your heart. Take 2 more breaths in this middle section, expanding the petals of the flower, the rib cage out in every direction, maybe bringing a little light to the center of your heart. And the last time in that middle. And now take the Adi Mudra, thumbs wrapped inside your fingers. Palms can be up or down on your thighs. And bring your attention to your sternum. Imagine that your belly and your rib cage remain still. And as you lift, your heart lifts towards the sky and your clavicles open wide. Perhaps your attention is a little bit more on your throat where the air is entering and leaving. This is a subtle area. Maybe your neck muscles are more involved in lifting this part of your chest. And then very gently bring your Adi Mudra hands right below the level of your belly button. We're going to take a deep breath in, filling all 3 chambers. And so you can breathe into the deepest area, the lowest, the rib cage, the sternum, and you can hold gently at the top. Your face is relaxed, your body is relaxed. And then, like you're squeezing a tube of toothpaste, slowly exhale, exhale, exhale. Bring your belly button in to squeeze out that last little bit. And take 2 more full, deep yogi breaths. Perhaps you add a little visualization where you're bringing light to the center of your heart, and that light gets brighter as you breathe in. Maintains its brightness at the top, even as you exhale. And with each inhalation, the heart becomes brighter. And that prana that you're building spreads evenly throughout your body, going to the places where it's needed, the places where you might be sore or hurting or healing. And you can gently open your eyes. I actually really feel that if we spend a little time teaching that kind of breath work to our patients as they recover from abdominal surgery, rather than necessarily giving them a plastic device to breathe in and to kind of look for that goal of where to breathe. I mean, it's good. It gives them a goal of where to breathe into. And yet there's something about connecting internally that I think would allow so much for healing and relaxing that we're missing out on. So we'll talk briefly now about Nadi Shodhana, or alternate nostril breathing, which really is the core of any pranayama practice. And so Nadi Shuddhi refers to the cleansing of those subtle pranic channels, those nadis that we talked about, which also correspond to the meridians that are used in acupuncture. And the idea is that you have a right side channel called your pingala, and you have a left side channel called your ida, and those two connect to the opposite sides of the brain. And many of you have heard this theory, it's not completely true, but the theory that your right side of the brain is the more spacious, more language oriented, and the left side of your brain is the more analytical. And often people have talked about right and left sides, and it's actually a lot more complicated than that. There is a lot of crossover, and though there is some truth. And whether or not breathing through one nostril or the other actually corresponds. There's some data that shows with like MRIs, FDG MRI studies that do actually show some. There's also some that don't. What I think is that the brain is capable of identifying with those thoughts. And so what we'll practice now is alternate nostril breathing. If you read Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it actually talks about that if you only do 12 rounds a day, that's kind of for the inferior yogi. And that if you're doing an advanced yogi technique, you should be hitting more like 36 rounds a day. I would say that you find what works for you. And we will practice today to just introduce the practice for some of you. So when you talk about the left side of the brain, people talk about that being your solar side, your energetic, your prana shakti, and your right nostril connects to the left side of the brain, and this is your solar side. Your right side of the brain is considered your lunar side and connected to the Ida channel. In the middle of the channel is, in the middle of those two channels, is the Sushumna, which is your central channel and the most balanced. So by alternating your breath work, that you work to balance your kind of energetic solar and your lunar relaxed side. And you have two ways to hold your hand. And actually a fun way is to not use your hand at all, especially if you have a deviated septum and this is difficult for you. You can actually do this just with your mind. But we'll use a mudra called the Naskara mudra. And that is where you bend your index and middle finger down and you keep your pinky finger and ring finger up. And you will gently use these to alternate your nostrils. Another way to practice while we're practicing today is to just gently, if that bothers your hand, to gently rest your index and middle finger right on your third eye. And that might be a more comfortable way and also keep you focused if your mind starts to wander. So go ahead and we'll start with alternate nostril practice, Nadi Shodhana. And you can take whichever mudra works for you. And again, if you have a deviated septum, it's not impossible for you to use. And you may also bring some attention to which nostril is more blocked for you today and notice throughout this practice if something changes. And what we'll do before we start is just find that same straight position where our ears are stacked over our hips. And we're going to maybe keep a chin mudra with your left hand. And just take a full breath in and out here, both nostrils open. And then take a full inhale through both nostrils. And gently take your right thumb to close the right nostril and exhale through the left. On your next inhale, you'll breathe in only through the left. Gently close the left nostril with your other fingers. As you switch through the slack tide, you exhale through the right. Inhaling slowly through the right. You gently close the right and exhale through the left. That's one full cycle. What I'd like you to do is take it for another 8 at your own rate. Noticing cool air as you inhale. Warm air on the hair on your lip as you exhale. The soft impact of the air on the back of your throat when you inhale. the air as it travels past your trachea on the exhale. The path the air takes all the way down to the deepest alveoli on the inhale. The lifting of your diaphragm to push out the air on the exhale. Perhaps you add a kumbhaka at the top or the bottom. Perhaps you concentrate on the relaxation of your face muscles or the free nostril as you exchange. Take your time. Notice the change in the resistance in one nostril versus the other. Notice if where you started was more in the Pingala nadi or the Ida nadi. Did that correlate with the way you felt when you started the practice? And are you able to sense a balance as you near the end? When you've completed the 9 cycles, go ahead and relax your hands, resting them on your thighs.
Anyway. Why is it frozen?
Often try to keep the mute on. That would be great. So, in the essence of time, I'm going to talk about some basic pranayama instruction. Pranayama is best led by a guru, and I am not a guru. I am, as I said, a wannabe yogi. I've had a lot of training and I've done a lot of reading. And one of the best things that you can do is practice, if you're just starting a practice, with someone who could look at the energy that you're bringing and what practices might be best for you and to help you move in the right direction. But as I said, the yamas and niyamas are part of what keeps your brain in that calm state. And that's part of the practice of pranayama, is practicing these areas. Your asana practice allows you to stay healthy and sit still. You may actually need some neti kriyas or other ways to clean out your nostrils if you're dealing with Houston allergies. You might want to find yourself practicing in a beautiful, clean, secluded place, or you may just find a place in your home that is your pranayama practice place. It's best to practice on a light stomach. It's best not to practice if you're pregnant, or at least certain types of practices. If you have hypertension, some of the holds can actually exacerbate that. And again, it's why it's important to have somebody talk to you specifically about your issues. And I wrote thunderstorm because there are many who feel that the earth's prana is too high for us to bring more into the area. Best to not practice if you are regularly smoking or drinking on a regular basis, although I can't vouch for that completely. And then no spicy foods or coffee. A sattvic diet is the best way to keep your body healthy. That's part of the yogic lifestyle. That means, fruit, vegetables, ghee, nuts, seeds, and some grains, and not too much food that clogs the nadis, like tamasic food, dull, heavy, preserved, or rajasic food, spicy, fried. And of course, I put a little note down there saying culture, because everybody's living in different places and different seasons and with different cultures, and what works for some may not work for others. So best to find somebody who's near you. And then also important as we continue the last couple practices is that I put abhyasa vairagya, that it takes practice with detachment to the outcome. Sometimes you'll find your mind is wandering during these practices and you just get up and try it again. If you notice that practices that we've introduced cause headaches, back pain, ringing in the ears, those are all reasons to make sure you're discussing this with both your physician as well as a yoga therapist. And then the important thing as you practice some of, especially the energetic practices that we'll do right before we finish, is no self-judgment, no struggle, don't over inhale, and don't overhold so that you feel air hunger. Never feel air hunger or like you're going to pop. You need to relax and let that strain go. So I want to I had three more practices, and I think what I'd like to do is just do two more. I think Kapalabhati is a very difficult practice, and I'd like to leave that for another time. I'd like to practice the last two practices with Bhastrika and Brahmari at the very end. And so energetic practices, you may have noticed, and I don't think a lot of people shared in the chat box, but the things that we practice to this point are more calming and balancing. We'll practice one energetic Bhastrika and then one calming Brahmari at the very end. So Bhastrika is called bellows breath, and it's kind of funny, nobody uses the bellows anymore, the pump that you would pump a fire and push the air in, but the idea is that it's a inhalation, exhalation, and they're equal in effort, and it is the most athletic of all the pranayamas. So I will caution anyone who has very high blood pressure, probably best to skip this one or just practice very slowly. And so the idea, oops, let me go back up, is that let me back up a little bit, is that you're going to raise your arms over your head and your hands will be raised very energetically. Your fingers will be spread wide as you raise them. And when you exhale, your elbows will drop to your side, and maybe your hands form a fist, not too tight, but just loosely. And the breath work will look something, again, relaxed face, stacked here, maybe a gentle smile, inner eye between your eyebrows. And then at the very end, we're going to try something. When we finished, and we'll do this about 12 times, I want you to, we'll take an inhalation with our arms up. You're going to lift through your pelvic floor and hold at the top, not to the point that you feel like you're going to pop, just enough. And when you relax, allow your palms to be palms up on your thighs. And I want you to focus on if you reach a moment of Kevalya Kumbhaka, that moment where you don't need to breathe, the moment where you are just the empty vessel, and wait for that moment when the earth breathes you. So let's begin with our hands next to our rib cage. Our palms are nice and relaxed. And we're going to take it for about 12 times. The inhalation will be like this. The exhalation will be like that, all through the nose. And so we'll go with you. I'll count inside so we don't disturb. Close your eyes. Take one full breath in here. One full breath out. And we'll begin. Inhale. Inhale, keep it in, open your fingers, breathe in as much as you can, lift through your pelvic floor, hold as long as you're comfortable. And relax. Allow your hands, palms up on your thighs. Allow yourself to notice some expansiveness in your head, maybe a space between your thoughts. Looking for that moment where you don't need to breathe. Waiting for the earth to breathe you, and then begin normal breath. We'll take that one more time, just because some people may have not tried this before. I know many of you are long-term practitioners. If you felt dizzy or lightheaded at that speed, please go slower. If you're pregnant, please don't go fast at all. You may want to just relax and take a few deep, full breaths.
Lois, I was thinking, do you want to unshare your slide? Just
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
people can
Oh,
see.
yeah. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Great. Okay, so my hands are nice, relaxed. And we'll begin together, and I'll count inside. You all count as well. Begin, inhale. Twelve, inhale. Fingers spread wide. Breathe in, sip in a little more air. Lift through the pelvic floor. Face is relaxed. Hold the breath in. Hold. If you feel you need to release, release. Otherwise, hold and release. Allow your palms to stay up. Notice if there's a pause. No need to inhale. Allow your thoughts to flutter by. And so that is a very energetic breath. It's one that I think is as good as a cup of coffee at 3 o'clock when your cortisol level is low, and one that is a nice practice to incorporate. I also find that it allows a little bit more spaciousness between your thoughts, where you may find that you can more easily enter a state of meditation. And so practicing that followed by Nadi Shodhana is a wonderful way to begin to practice maybe after asana and before meditation. We'll skip Kapalabhati today, which is another wonderful practice, but I want to stay on time.
Lois, we do have some questions, and I'll try to bring them up after your last practice.
Okay, let's do the last practice. Now let me just go back for a minute. There's two practices that I'm not going to do today. One that I really love to teach patients, which is pulse-based breathing. And many of you who don't know how to take your pulse, I would love to spend more time with you all. But if you take your own pulse, whether it's by your radial pulse or your carotid pulse, and this is a wonderful thing to teach patients, and you have a regular heartbeat, you'll find that you have an internal metronome, and you can actually practice box breathing or 4-7-8 breathing, breathing that we're not going to get to today, and notice your autonomic nervous system slow down. But many people have trouble quieting their mind during these practices. And this is the practice that I like to give to those patients. And so our final practice will be Brahmari. And I'm happy to stay on longer if you guys don't mind afterwards. And I know I have wonderful experts on as well who can help answer questions. But with this practice, we're going to be, it's called the humming bee breath. And it's a wonderful way to really go inside and to turn away. And here, I'm going to turn this. Stop sharing here. It's a wonderful way to close your self off from all the impact that we have throughout the day. And you can pick a number of different ways to practice. The simplest way is to find that little piece of cartilage on your ear, and don't close it now or you won't hear what I'm saying. But you'll, as you hum, you will press in on this and keep your eyes closed. But the classical way is to traditional way is to close all the orifices of your body. And one point of reference is you don't really close your nose or you won't be able to do the practice. So it's a gentle resting on the side of your nose, but you can kind of spread your fingers throughout your face where you're gently closing your eyes. You've got your middle finger resting right above your nares or your nostrils. You've got your ring finger on your upper lip and your pinky finger on your bottom, and then your thumbs are free to close in. And I promise we're not taking a picture of anyone now, so please don't worry. When we begin, we're going to just make a humming bumblebee sound and allow your exhalation to last as long as possible. So we'll take that only twice in the reference to time. And so we'll all breathe one full breath in together and one full breath out. And on your next inhale, we'll inhale and press in on that cartilage. So go ahead and breathe in for the beginning of the Brahmari breath. Inhale. Press in on the cartilage. After you finish, see if you can still connect with that sense of vibration. It's no longer audible, but it's still palpable throughout your body, throughout your thoughts, still moving. So as we finish up today, I want to just say that, there's so much research still to be done for pranayama. It really is amazing that we were born with this tool, and it kind of blows my mind that we don't spend time teaching this in elementary school. One of the things that we did in Vyasa before every test is we were asked to do alternate nostril breathing, and I can't believe that we don't teach kids to do that before their ACTs or their SATs. So it helps in reversing heart disease, increase energy, providing a sense of calm, but it may actually help us manage our inflammatory system and our immune system. And there's so much more to be done. So as I said, the first couple sutras of the Yoga Sutras talk about that when your mind is still, that you can see and connect with your true self. And when your mind is not still, it becomes the fluctuations. And you all have experienced that, I'm sure. So by slowing our breath, we can slow our mind. Here's some references that I have used in learning about all of these practices. And with that, I want to thank you guys for being here with me on this practice. As I said, I'm a wannabe yogi. I want to learn how to, I'm continuously learning, as all are you. And I hope that my perspective on pranayama was useful to you. And I'll go answer some of the questions. Oh, I'm so glad somebody said you feel calm and centered. I appreciate that, Michelle and Renee. Glad you guys are here. And then, amazing, Lorenzo, how this can be so calming and how we don't use this on a regular practice. I'm gonna go down a little bit.
Do you mind sharing the reference again?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy to. Let's see.
While Lois is pulling that up, I want to thank you for such an excellent workshop today. One of the very important, I think, takeaways for all of us is a lot of these Eastern yogic traditional practices are brought in, and a lot of times for various reasons to make it more secular, we strip it off, its roots, and in many ways, we just say, breathe. That's all is important. That's the lesson for us to take today. But what I really liked about Lois's presentation today is the beauty that she brought it from the traditional perspective, brought an understanding to the scientific aspect of why and how this is important. And she went back to, if you really want to work on increasing your energy, prana, and the source of life force within you, not just the breathing is important, it comes back to the bigger lifestyle perspective, how you think, what you eat. And this is the approach that Lorenzo Cohen is on call, what he calls as yoga with the capital Y, and what we all know from the yogic traditions, that this is what our seers, rishis wanted us to practice. It is the approach of, to life that combines, all aspects of yoga. So I'm so grateful. Thank you, Lois, for such an excellent workshop today.
Yeah.
I also would quickly like to thank India House for supporting this, promoting this. We have an excellent audience. I would say our in and out audience is close to 100 people today that have been stayed on for the longest. We consistently had about 80 folks throughout the practice today. So thanks for that. And for those of you who are interested in furthering this journey, whenever we attend such workshops and practice, we are, enthusiastically, wow, this is so good. 10 breaths can do such wonder. But what does it take for us to make it part of our life, everyday living, is, making it a sadhana, a journey. So Vyasa Houston here, we offer courses for yoga teacher training, where a simple course, even if you don't teach yoga to other people, this can be useful for your own practice on a daily basis. So you can look that up, Vyasa Houston on website, and you'll have a lot of information. And India House offers thrice a week yoga classes that are free for community, both in person and online. So there are various opportunities for you to make yoga part of your life. Please make sure that you take this opportunity to use that. Lois, let's get back to questions. And I know people are eager.
Yeah, and I want to say, Smita, you also, I want to mention that, Lorenzo Cohen's on as well, and I work for MD Anderson. I've worked for them for 26 years, and we are thrilled to be able to offer free yoga for our patients. We do it 3 times a week. Smita has been doing pranayama classes, and we also offer yoga nidra for our patients. And this is a program that we're trying to build, and it's something that we're very interested in finding a supportive community. So if there are people who are interested and want to reach out to us about what we're doing at MD Anderson, please do that. I'm going to try to look at some of these questions, and I may, there's a couple questions of should and things. And things to what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And I want to say that there are so many ways to practice and so many ways to adjust your breath that there isn't necessarily a should. There are some wrong things to do. And certainly if somebody is feeling, I've heard things like you shouldn't do Bhastrika if you're feeling very anxious, but I will tell you, as a typically rajasic or kind of passionate person, to me, sometimes doing Bhastrika before something like a Nadi Shodhana is really useful because I cannot calm my mind without doing it. What do the arms do? They actually increase your heart rate. They actually make this a really physical practice to do this. You don't have to do it that way. You could just do full deep breaths in and out, but by using the arms, you definitely increase the blood flow and increase your heart rate. And that's similar to some of the Kundalini practices where your arms might stay up for a full portion of the practice. And these are all different ways of practicing. You could say, take a deep breath, and you could go all the way to holotropic breathing, where, people have actually fallen into kind of a hypoxic state by the way they're breathing, which is not encouraged, but somewhere in there, all of these practices are. And there's so much to learn about them. And let me go back to a couple of questions. I think the arm movement one I did. Should alternate nostril?
Question. Sorry, go ahead.
One said, should alternate nostril breathing being done with Ujjayi breath, or does it not matter? So again, I would say there isn't a should. In my opinion, it might be more you want to take a full breath, but you don't want to do it shallowly, and you want to take a complete breath. Because yes, I think you could make, somebody else said, could you make yourself more anxious with some of these breaths? And yes, you could, especially if you're not breathing fully or you're over holding or overfilling. So there's like a good practice. And also that's why I said, if your face is not relaxed, then you're probably not enjoying the practice the way you should be. And I think you can, sometimes I do alternate nostril with Ujjayi, and sometimes I hold longer. And especially if I notice that my mind started wandering during alternate nostril, that I say, oh, I'm going to bring a little more attention, build a little bit more heat, and hold a little bit longer. Reason for Kumbhaka? Well, geez, I don't know. I'd say that the reason is the most settled that you can be. If in that moment after energetic breath work, where you really are a vessel being breathed by the earth around you, that you are fully empty of thoughts, and as close, it's part, as the pranayama masters say, it is part of it's one of the most important steps in getting to the point of samadhi, to be able to get to that point that you find your inner bliss. You can practice either interrupted inhalation or interrupted exhalation. And it's described as energetic as the interrupted inhalation and as relaxing for the interrupted exhalation. However, I think you have to personalize it. When I practice interrupted exhalation, I really have to consciously stay relaxed. So on that Viloma breath, where you are climbing the mountain on the way up, is very energizing. Holding at the top is an energizing movement. Pausing on the way down is reported as relaxing. And I think you have to experience that for yourself. That also answers the benefit of interrupted Viloma. So these are all ways to practice. And what you are doing is changing your tidal volume. You're changing your the muscles of your intercostal muscles are becoming stronger. And you'll notice, if you guys really start to practice, that you will notice that your intercostal muscles are getting stronger. What's the best time to practice pranayama? Sleeping issue? Boy, practicing pranayama, relaxing pranayama before bed is a great idea. And in fact, when I find myself with insomnia in the middle of the night, it's an amazing time to do the one I fall back on when I'm sleeping is 4-7-8 breath. And we didn't do that today, but that is, and it's easy to Google that. It's a breath in for the count of 4. It's a hold, if it's comfortable for you, for 7 counts. For in the beginning, it might only be 4 counts. And it's an exhalation through the mouth, nice and soft, same volume of air that you inhaled, for a count of 8. So you're reaching that ratio that Patanjali talks about, where your inhalation is half of your exhalation. The longer your exhalation, the more you'll engage your parasympathetic nervous system. So at bedtime, great time to practice. In the morning time, when I like to meditate, I will usually do Bhastrika, followed by alternate nostril, followed by a meditation, because sometimes I can't get out. If I jump right into alternate nostril, I might still be sleepy, and I might still be thinking about the things I need to do later in the day. And for me, that's the practice that works, is some Bhastrika to wake myself up, to clear my thoughts, to alternate nostril to balance, and then to meditate.
There's another question for, how about ending it with a brief shavasana? Definitely can be done.
Yes. And actually the deep relaxation technique that we practice at Vyasa, which incorporates chanting ah, oo, and is another way of practicing pranayama as you relax. So as you're exhaling and singing or chanting, you are practicing the long exhale, finding a deep way of connecting vibrations to the lower, middle, and upper part of your body. and really incorporating your Anamaya kosha, your Pranamaya kosha, and your Manamaya kosha in the deepest relaxation technique.
One other thing,
Is this you sharing?
no, Miraji, I think you're trying to share.
So let's see.
Okay. One other question, does practicing, alternating the length of your inhalations and exhalation, does it alter the mind? And Lois addressed that in her, according to yoga texts, where the breath goes, the mind flows. So breath and mind are very closely connected. And that is why breathing is part of every yoga practice, including asanas, meditation. Lois, if you want to add to that.
I was going to say, Leela, I didn't mean to put a question mark there and you can't erase it, but what you asked is something about flowers. So meditation and breath work obviously can be combined. And sometimes I like to take patients through the idea that their heart is like a beautiful rosebud, and it brings a little bit more visualization to opening up your chest. So if you can imagine you're opening one petal at a time as you breathe in. And then as you breathe out, you're kind of forming this beautiful rosebud that's ready to start again. Sometimes I like to think of it as a small light that's growing in brightness, and the light either maintains it or it just kind of is the core that's always there. And then another meditation might be meditating about the bright light running up the Sushumna and focusing on the chakra right above your head, and then imagining kind of light coming out around. That's called fountain breath, and it's just a beautiful way to incorporate into your practice. So I'm so glad you all joined. Thank you for being here. Like I said, this was just about ending with a brief shavasana. I think we're probably beyond that and would love to have done that, but it's so glad that you all joined. And there's so much more therapeutic pranayama techniques. There's specific to, we didn't even talk about bandhas or incorporating the Mula Bandha or Uddiyana Bandha or the Jalandhar Bandha. So many other ways to play with pranayama.
I just want to let everyone know the entire session is recorded and will be available on India House website for later viewing. If anybody joined late and missed the initial part or had to leave early, please watch for a recording. Will be uploaded within the next couple of days.
Great. Thank you so much.
Everyone, have a wonderful day.
Oh, yes, Michelle and Renee, I work with Alejandro also.